Welcome to Module 1, Lesson 2, Embracing Leaders' Role as Building Capability. This lesson will center on the role of the leaders in enabling the culture of continuous improvement. In the previous lesson, we learned that one key element of lean transformation is to build that lean management system. This system will promote, sustain, and grow the lean practices in the organization. And we believe that leaders play a very important role in the development of the capability of the people. At the end, we would like to emphasize that leadership is not to tell teams what to do, but to unify teams around a shared goal and then eliminate any obstacle preventing them from achieving these goals. So in this lesson, we would like to emphasize on or answer these two important questions. First is, what is the leader's role in enabling the culture of process improvement? And second is, what routines that leaders can practice to develop their coaching skills and develop the capability of their people. So before we start our lesson 2 proper, allow me to review some key concepts and discussion points in lesson 1. Let's quickly recall what we have discussed in lesson 1, specifically on the lean transformation model. So again, this is your model and it's illustrated via a house. So at the top level, this is where the overall direction of the company is stated, and it's being supported by the two pillars here. We have the process improvement and then the capability development. And of course, what's also important is the foundation of the transformation, which are the needed mindset and thinking and assumption of lean. But the one that binds them together is the management system. So in your lean management system, it comprises of different elements, which we would like to highlight the importance of the role of the leaders in creating that standard work that will emphasize on the routines and the practices in the organization. In this lesson, we would like to discuss in detail on how we can set up a management system that will develop the capability of the people. This system will reinforce the improvement practices and routines of both the leader and the learner. We will still use the kata daily routines that we have discussed in level 1 and level 2 of our courses. So the basic question in setting up the lean management system is, what management system and leader behaviors do we need to reinforce the basic thinking and the basic methodology in process improvement and hence the development of the people? Normally, the culture of continuous improvement are not achieved because these improvements are not connected in their daily routines in their organization. They treat initiatives as project when there is start and end. What we want to happen to counter that failure is to create that management system that the managers are also equally responsible in the performance and the improvement of their processes. So this should be owned by both the managers and his team, and it should not be a sole responsibility of just the lean team or the lean projects or the lean program office, which is the main reason why there is failure or non-sustainability of continuous improvement in the organization. The lean management system that we would like to set up emphasizes more on the task of the leaders, that it's not only about the improvement per se, but also to make it more sustainable is to develop the improvement capability of the people. So improving their capability takes the effort of both the leaders and the process owner in working together to achieve that improvement targets they want to do. So let's now tackle a more detailed discussion on how the leader's role in enabling the culture of process improvement, specifically on developing that lean management system that we have discussed so far. The mindset and how the people behave in an organization reflects the management system in place. In this VUCA world, it is the responsibility of the managers on how to create that agile organization that is very flexible in addressing the ever-changing requirements of the business. And we believe that the coaching learner approach is one of the critical elements of creating that management system, especially in developing the capability of the people to improve their processes. So the illustration here at the right side explains how the coaching mechanism will be deployed in the entire organization. So the coaching approach can be replicated to the entire organization with less dependencies on outside support. So the development is more organic and we don't need so much support on the consultants for them to create that routine in developing their people. Anyone can start as a learner and then developing that learner to a coach, and that coach now is also to develop another coach. So in this way, the routines can easily be magnified and replicated to the entire organization, hence the management system we wanted. So we can also look at the coaching systems as a way to support the achievement of the organization's vision. So in this diagram, this is the typical way we deploy the visions to the process level targets. And we believe that the coaching mechanism is very helpful in the process level, wherein their managers are the coach and the supervisors or their one downs are the process improvement teams or what we call the learners. We have already established the importance of developing the improvement capability of our people through a management system. Therefore, let's try to recall the key elements in developing a new skill that we have discussed in level 1. In this lesson, we will focus on developing our coaching skills to help reinforce the kata routines of the improvement team. This will make sure that the challenge they're addressing is aligned to the overall direction of the organization. The coach will also help the learner address the obstacle in achieving the challenge. Then once overcome, self-efficacy will be realized, hence more confidence and motivation to address more problems. So our hope is that at the end of this lesson, we can answer these common questions and challenges in developing a new skill and implementing this new skill in the entire organization. The hope is really to make this as part of their daily routine and hence the culture of the organization. So let's now go to the details on how the leaders would develop their coaching skills that will result to the development of the capability of their people. Let's quickly recall that kata has two major components. The first part is the improvement kata, which we have discussed and practiced heavily in lesson 2. So this is the 4-step approach in improvement. Then in this lesson, we will focus on coaching kata, which supports the improvement kata. So the focus in coaching kata is the development of our skill as a coach to support the improvement kata teams. There are prerequisites and qualification before you can practice coaching kata. Our lean program is designed for you to be prepared as a coach. So remember, we started with level 1, just being aware of what the lean concepts are. And in level 2, we ask you to apply the improvement kata. And lastly, this level 3 should be able to help you teach kata and coach kata to your people. We also listed down here some qualifications or some guidelines on how we can assess that we are ready to coach. So first is we should be an experience in both the pattern and principles of improvement kata. We are willing to take a different management approach, which is to guide and teach rather than directing people on what to do. We are keen observers for both technical and interpersonal skill. Kata is not only about improvement, but also how emotions can also help us manage the success and the failures of the journey. Next is we are really focused on the learner's progress and also our own progress. So it's really about not being afraid to commit mistakes. And then we listen more than talk, so we could know where our learners are coming from, and we are very comfortable in the different experimentation because that experiment is the only way we can learn about ourselves and also about the process and about our learners. So the scope of the coaching to the improvement team is actually every step of the improvement kata. So as you can see here, this is the learners' steps as they follow the improvement kata. And here is the coach interacting with the learner. So as you can see, from understanding the direction or challenge up until establishing the next target condition, this is what we call the planning coaching cycle. And then once they do doing the PDCA cycles or the experimenting cycles, we are now going through the execution coaching cycle. So this cycle I would have to iterate depending on the progress of the team in achieving the next target condition. To start developing your coaching skills, Kata provided you with the 5 basic questions and learner's reflection questions. So these 5 questions here, I'm sure this is not new to you. We were able to touch on this, but in a very high-level view during our kata discussion. And this is the reflection questions from the learner based on the last step taken. So what's the purpose of these 5 questions? So this will reinforce the improvement kata pattern of your learners. And number 2, very important, is to help the coach see how the learner is thinking so that the coach can give appropriate feedback and correction. So the normal setup is that you have the kata board or the learner's board. You have the coach here, and on the other side, the learner. So the learner is pointing to the kata board whenever he or she answers the questions from the coach. The coach can use this 5 questions and you can print it and have it in a card size for you to easy have a quick look of the questions. And normally these coaching cycles will just take short period of time. Normally it's 20 minutes for you to focus on the important aspect of the learning process. The slide shows the kata improvement and coaching structure. So basically, what we know so far is that we have the learner, which is actually responsible in doing the improvement kata with his team. So the learner will follow the improvement kata steps, the 4 steps. And then outside of their team, here is the coach. The coach will be responsible in the learner's capability, in the learner's ability to practice the improvement kata, and the coach is also responsible in the learner's result. Now we have a second coach here who sees the coach and then the learner. Of course, we can't expect that you would have a good coach already. There has to be someone who is also looking at how the coach is helping the learner. So the second coach actually gives the feedback to the coach in his practice in helping the learner. Let's now go through the coaching kata cycles and what should be our mindset, what are the points and guidelines of our coaching activities. There are 2 main important goals of coaching cycles. The first goal is more on your responsibility to your learners in terms of supporting them in the application of the improvement kata in their focus process. When we say support, it's not to spoon feed them to the solutions. It's not about telling them what to do, but helping them go through these obstacles in achieving their objectives, even though it takes some pains in terms of failures in some of their experiments. But what is important is they've learned in that exercise And then number two, of course, very important, is also think about yourself. So whenever you do cycles, especially in the early part of your practice, you should have that retrospective every time you do the cycles for you to improve yourself as well as a coach, because it is your responsibility on the result of the improvement. I just want to quickly differentiate the traditional way of handling process improvement and versus the coaching kata way of developing people in improvement. So first is the traditional is the team will report its progress to the management, maybe for every step of the process, and then the management will give directions on what to do. In coaching kata, you can see that there is an overlap. There's a continuous dialogue between the coach and then the learner for each of the step of the improvement kata. In this case, it develops the accountability both of the learner and then the coach, and also they are both responsible of what will be the results of this improvement effort. There are three important learning points to identify or recognize during the coaching cycles. Number one, as a coach, we should be able to assess the current status of the learner's thinking process, because this will serve as our basis of our feedback to them, especially in the next steps of their journey. Number two, we need to identify the current knowledge threshold. So what it means is that this is where the point that the learners don't know the answer, they don't have the data or the observations to support their claims. So this is actually the area of exploration. Once we have identified that current knowledge threshold, we should be able to help the learners design a good experiment to answer that threshold, or to discover that threshold, for them to see further and maybe address the obstacle in front of them. Number three is to give procedural feedback to the learner to help the learner internalize the scientific thinking improvement kata pattern. So we will be strict in terms of following the coaching kata questions, because it's already the framework, the mindset, and the scientific approach is already embedded in those questions. So again, the coaching cycle involves the coach going to the 5 coaching questions with one learner, and the learner responds to the coach by pointing relevant and appropriate data on the learner storyboard. The coaching cycles also helps the learners reflect on the last steps in their experiment and the way forward. So they will also review the learner's plan for the next steps. The coach must also give feedback as necessary, especially on the learner's procedure or to the design of the experiment to answer their current knowledge threshold. So the 5 coaching kata questions are nested to each other just like a funnel. So we would like to emphasize that when you do ask questions, we follow the correct sequence. So at first, it might be awkward because you are like very scripted. You feel it's scripted, but trust the coaching kata process, because as we repeat and repeat this, the pattern now will sink in. The framework will sink into both the coach and the improvement team and become now a habit for you whenever you look at your improvement initiatives. Before going to a coaching cycle with your improvement team, you as the coach must review the 5 coaching kata questions. It is important as a coach to understand the intention of each of these questions. So the first 2 questions are, what is the target condition and what is the actual condition now? These 2 questions basically is your framing and anchoring on your dialogue with your improvement team. This basically highlights how far is the actual condition to the target condition. The next part is for you to review the learner's last step, what happened and what they have learned in their previous experiment. The third question is, what obstacles do you think are preventing you from reaching the target condition? Which one are you addressing now? As a coach, you must help the improvement team focus only on one obstacle. This will be more efficient, and this will promote fast action, and hopefully addressing the will hope address the issue faster and learn from it. The next question is, what is your next step or the next experiment, and what do you expect? As a coach, you're helping the learner design the next step at the threshold of knowledge based on what they have learned from the last step. So after identifying the threshold of knowledge wherein they are now they don't know the answer yet, they don't know what will be the solution in their constraints. By going through this experiment, hopefully they will learn from this. So it's very important that you guide them in this formulation of their experiment. The last part is how quickly can we go and see what we have learned from taking the step. So this basically setting with your improvement team by agreeing on when the next experiment will be done, the time for the next coaching cycle, and what information the learner should prepare. So this is basically your next steps, and making sure that you will go back again with this coaching cycle. So since you're practicing the first time, you can print the 5 questions and the reflection questions, so you'll be guided during the coaching cycle. So for each of the coaching cycle, it follows a certain pattern. So first, the coach will ask the question. Again, these are the 5 coaching kata questions. And then the learner will respond and the coach will listen. Then your role now is to determine how the learner is thinking versus to the improvement kata pattern or our desired pattern. And then from that, the coach now will give the feedback or and corrective actions if necessary, if there is non-compliance to the desired pattern. Then both of them will agree what will be the next steps. So again, the purpose of the coaching cycle and practicing the coaching kata questions is to reinforce the pattern, making sure that it is actually being done scientifically. And then by asking these questions, the coach now will learn how the learner is thinking, and then they can now provide situational corrective feedback if necessary. This can only be done if you have the storyboard in place. So very important that before the coaching cycle will happen, the board is already accomplished by the learner. One common question in coaching cycle is how long and how frequent you should conduct coaching cycles. So there's no hard rule on this, but they are suggesting to do this 20 minutes a day, and the coaching cycle should be frequent and the scope should be small. So this will facilitate more fast course of action and hence faster learning for the improvement teams. It only will take short period of time because the coaching cycle is focused on reviewing the learner's process of experimenting and not doing the experiment itself. So the role of the coach is to help them design the experiment that will lead them to the learning. But the actual conduct of the experiment, it's the sole responsibility of the learner. Aside from the coaching kata questions, the coach are also encouraged to ask clarifying questions to know what the learners are thinking. So these are some of the guidelines on how we should ask questions. First is avoid closed-ended questions. For example, are you sure? This does not give information about the learner's thinking because it can be answerable by yes or a no. So you can't understand what's going on in the thinking process of your learner. Be careful asking your learner the question why, because using this word can easily feel confrontational rather than constructive, especially if you ask it repeatedly. Plus, if also the coach is the manager of that learner, of course, the natural tendency is for the learner to answer the question of why, even though he or she doesn't have any data to show, because he is pressured that he's expected that he knows everything. It is usually better to use clarifying questions that begin with tell me more about or can you show me. So during the coaching session, ideally the board is near, or the learner's board should be near the process that they are trying to improve. So the learner can also invite the coach to show what's going on. Open-ended questions require more thought, more than a one-word answer, and begin with words such as, so you can also use this, how, what, describe, tell me more about, what do you think about, what exactly is happening, how do you know. You can also use universal clarifying statement like please show me. So just a comparison of close-ended and open-ended question. So close-ended, did you measure several cycles at the focus process? It's better to ask this way. Can you show me your latest data about the focus process? So it brings out whatever data they have so that you can see what process they have gone through in their preparation of this dialogue with you. So immediately, as a coach, you can see what actually can be corrected or what can be improved. So we also provided here some clarifying questions side by side with the 5 coaching kata questions. We hope this will also help you formulate your own clarifying questions later on as you practice and practice this coaching kata cycles. But immediately you can use these examples to further understand where your learners are coming from and what they are thinking. I would like to emphasize that that setting up the learner storyboard is very, very important because this is the reference of the dialogue between the coach and then the learner. Ideally, this should be very near to the focus process so that whenever the learner would like to show something or to discuss further what's the actual condition, for example, the learner can invite the coach in the focus process. The board also forces the improvement team to follow the scientific approach of kata improvement pattern, and this is also shows the story behind what the team of the improvement team have gone through in their journey of their improvement initiatives. And hence, because of that, the coach now will have a better picture of how the learner is thinking. In response to each coaching kata question, the learner should be able to pinpoint the data that will support their answer to make sure that they will not verbally making up ad hoc answers, and for the coach to see whether they have the data or not, or if they already reach a certain knowledge threshold. And this is very critical because this is where the coach will come in and guide and correct the learner's thinking pattern. I think one of the core skill that the coach should have is the ability to catch knowledge threshold for every coaching cycle. So let me define first what a knowledge threshold is. It is the point at which we have insufficient facts and data and start assuming. There's a current knowledge threshold for the learner in almost every coaching cycle related to the obstacle that the learner is trying to overcome. As a coach, if you fail to spot knowledge threshold, then it's very difficult to give constructive feedback. It's very difficult to help the learner overcome the obstacles and to achieve the result. So again, it's very important to track or to spot those knowledge threshold. So how do we spot it? So we listed down some indicators that the learner already reached the knowledge threshold. So the learner uses words such as I think, probably, maybe, could, most likely, or on the average 90% of the time. The learner says let's reduce or increase it 50%. So it's an indicator because a 50% is a like a guess estimate, typical response on which we lack of specific or calculated numbers. The data are outdated. The learner seems overconfident but can't explain why to support their answer. The learner refers to anecdotes without hard data. So it is very important, again, to spot this knowledge threshold because without this, it's difficult for us to help the learners in their next steps, now to discover and answer and find the solutions to their questions. Here is a sample dialogue when you reach a certain knowledge threshold. Ideally, you'd like the learner to say we are at the knowledge threshold. But of course, if you are the manager and you are also the coach, it's the natural tendency is to answer all of your questions even though they don't know exactly the answer. But this is what we want them to have. This is the mindset that we want them to have. At the moment, I don't know the answer and I don't want to jump to conclusions. Here is the next step or the experiment I intend to take to help me get the facts and the data we need to learn more. So here is the highlight of your coaching. You were able to spot the knowledge threshold and there is a plan to how they can answer that question or to address that knowledge threshold. This is where your coaching insights will come in. Is the next step sound, scientifically sound? Will it actually follow the scientific pattern of kata? If not, this is where the point that you can already give them insights and instruct them on the better way to do the next steps. So to make them more comfortable in this exercise, you can encourage this kind of thinking by saying like, it's not a problem if you don't know. Just tell me how you plan to figure it out or how can we find that out. So this is the scientific thinking. Depends on being able to acknowledge what you don't know so that we know what to test next. It is by admission that we don't know the answer so we can plan on how we can address it. And that's the highlight of your coaching cycle. So we summarize in this slide some coaching errors to watch for so you can go over them. But I would like to highlight on specific way on how we can give feedback. So sometimes we have the tendency to have it very vague. And here's an example. So a vague question, a vague feedback would be, you should be more detailed in grasping the current condition. So it does not help the learner on how he or she can do it. So maybe a good specific feedback would be making a run chart based on timing 30 cycles can help you get more detailed understanding of the current condition, especially the behavior of the process performance. Another example is you need to give that more thought. So again, it's very vague. So you can help the learner by asking this question. How could you be sure this pattern holds across both shifts? So it actually gives an idea to the learner that he needs to gather on different shifts and compare them. Right? So again, we have to be very cautious in giving our feedback. Also, I would like to highlight that we should not be using the question starting with why. Sometimes the coach are already in the mode of solving the problem for the learners, and we don't want that to happen. The 5 whys are actually brainstorming technique, and it's not a coaching technique because you cannot see how the learners are thinking. The tendency is for them to defend themselves and defend their actions. So before we end this lesson, we have also included in the material some detailed guidelines on each of the 5 questions in coaching kata questions. For each of the question, we will highlight the key points that you as the coach should remember. We have also included there some clarifying questions that can support the 5 coaching kata questions, and also some watch point on the weak point side of the learner, which can be a good indicator that they have already reached a knowledge threshold. So we will also include that in the PDF file of this presentation. So as a summary, these are the 3 main key ideas for this lesson. Number 1, coaching kata is about developing people, not developing solutions. Number 2, practicing improvement kata is an everyday job for everyone in the organization. Practicing coaching kata is every leader's responsibility. And lastly, improvement kata or coaching kata is a set of behavioral routines. It is learned through repeated practice, and we should always ask the 5 questions.